You want me to add them all?
I think I just did. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Ryan Smith. I'm with the Fellowship Using the Science of Engagement here at UT Austin. And I'm joined by our partnership coordinator, Ms. Catherine Yanda. She's here on the call today. Super excited to meet you all and tell you a little bit about Fuse and the work that Dr. David Yeager and others here at the university have created this fellowship for secondary math teachers. Right now, we work mainly in the state of Texas, but I know on our call today, in which I'm assuming a lot of you are going to be watching the recording because we have over 10 countries. People from 10 different countries signed up for our session this morning. So I'm sure time zones are different for everybody. So wherever you are out there watching today, I want to thank you for joining us. I'm going to go over a lot of the details of what the fellowship would look like for your teachers. If you have anybody on your campus who would like to join next year. We'll talk a little bit about the science of engagement that we share with your teachers throughout the experience. And we'll have some time at the end for questions as well. Feel free to pop into the chat if you have any questions at all. Along the way, I'll be able to stop and answer those. And you'll get a recording and the slides and everything like that afterwards when we're done. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in then. So the first thing I'd like you to do, is just picture in your mind an Algebra 1 student. 14, 15 years old in a classroom. Could be here in the States, could be at one of our international schools. I know we have several folks from our international schools on today. And just picture a typical student, and do you think what percentage of them would pick that easy problem? They're presented two choices, right? Either have that easy problem where you don't necessarily learn anything new, or a challenging problem that you might not get it right, but you might learn a lot along the way. So go ahead and just stick in the chat, like what percentage of students, Algebra 1 students, you think would pick that easy problem where they didn't learn anything new? You can just dump whatever percent you think that would be in the chat. I think your chat buttons are up there at the top. A couple coming in, 80%, 80%. Thank you, Nate and Brooke, Leslie, 70%. If you've seen this presentation before, don't ruin it for everybody else. But I will say I've given this presentation all around Texas for about the last year and a half. And no matter what group of adults I'm speaking to, whether it's teachers, parents, principals, superintendents, anybody, they always way overestimate the percent of students who would pick that easy problem. Usually it's in the high 80s, low 90s. Sometimes it's like 100%. I assume every teenager would rather take the easy road, right? They don't want to see that challenge. But in reality, the study that we did with Algebra 1 students across the United States is that number is really only 63. So only 63% of Algebra 1 students would take that easy problem. And that really tells us two things, right? One, as adults, our inclination is to underestimate the amount of challenge that our young people seek, right? We almost assume a negative, that they're looking for that easy road. And the other thing that really surfaces is that, it should be, 100%. The only purpose of coming to school, right, is to learn something new. And if we're coming just to take the easy road all the time and not have that challenge, then what's the point of education to begin with? So I always like to just frame us in that mindset of what we really talk about within the fellowship. A big piece with teachers is how to chip away at some of those perceived misconceptions that we have about young people and about the amount of challenge that they really do seek, and how we can help frame our language and our cultures in our math classrooms to help them take some of that challenge seeking and actually implement it within math. We see them implemented outside of the math classroom all the time because a lot of times those cultures are tuned, to help young people take those challenges. But then they come into math and they won't raise their hand. So a lot of that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Feel free, like I said, you can put any kind of questions in the chat, anything like that you wish. But I want to jump in to really some of the data that we're seeing with our fellowship so far. And after, the last couple of years working with around 200 to 250 teachers all around the state of Texas, there's really these two big problems, that we're hearing and that we're seeing Fuse being able to influence. One is that is low student math performance, right? We all want to improve, how our students are performing, not only on state assessments and high stakes tests, but also just that informal performance that's happening every day, that willingness to try something new, to raise your hand, to ask for help. And that lack of willing to engage is what we believe anyway is one of many, but one of the driving element that contributes to teacher burnout and attrition. Yeah, there's other reasons that teachers might be feeling that way, but a big problem we believe, and that at least our program can help with to kind of influence both of these issues, is around helping to create a better environment for student engagement to thrive in a secondary math classroom in particular. And what our teachers are telling us in Fuse is that when we help them improve that engagement in their classroom, not only do their students' math performance improve, but they feel less of a sense of burnout, and they are less likely to report that they want to leave the math profession, or even less likely to no longer teach Algebra 1. I don't know what your context is like, but in a lot of campuses I talk to here in Texas, we get a great Algebra 1 teacher, and we give them a lot of training, and especially a ninth grade Algebra 1 teacher, where those are the teachers that we really want working with our struggling students, maybe didn't take Algebra 1 in eighth grade. As soon as one of the first things they want to do after they really kind of tune themselves into teaching Algebra 1 is oftentimes they want to go teach geometry or Algebra 2 or pre-cal or something like that. What we're really seeing within our fellowship is that it's helping teachers feel that sense of accomplishment within that Algebra 1 classroom and want to stay in that class, so we can help grow some performance there. So just some data that we've seen in Fuse over the last 2 years. One I always like to share is we don't talk specifically about improving your mindset. We don't use that word too much in Fuse, but we create an environment where a growth mindset can flourish. I'm going to talk a little bit about the professors who are behind Fuse and work with your teachers, but it's the creme de la creme in mindset work around the states and internationally. But what we're seeing is within 4 months into the program, our teachers are reporting reduction in a sense of a fixed mindset by 25% 4 months into the program. And we're also seeing our students. So we ask them questions throughout the time in Fuse. The students in your teachers' classrooms will be completing modules, and we ask them some questions in there. The students who receive the Fuse work through a teacher are 10% more likely to report that they feel more respected in class and feel less math anxiety. We also have some math items in those modules that they complete as well, and students in the Fuse classrooms are performing better on those actual math test items. And then finally, as I mentioned before, teachers in Fuse classrooms so far over the last 2 years in our RCT are half as likely to report feeling burnt out. And our big hypothesis is that if you're a teacher in that classroom, and even if a student is struggling with the math, if they stay engaged with you in the process, then you're going to feel more valued as that teacher, and you're going to, even if that student doesn't end up passing the test, if they're engaged and they're working through it and they're not shutting down and blocking you out as the adult, then you're going to feel less of a sense of burnout yourself, and you'll be able to continue to work with that student. So those are some of our big data points we always like to share. But I want to give us just a few minutes too to look at some of the science that we always share with your teachers. A lot of times I talk about Fuse, it's like a cram course of adolescent development and motivational science of adolescence that oftentimes teachers don't get in their preparation programs, but university students do get it if they are going in psychology and going in that route or going in that behavioral science route. So we're very different than most programs through University of Texas. Like, we're not in the education department, like we're in the psychology department. So Dr. Yeager, who's our main scientific advisor, he's the one that works directly with your teachers on the science. We take a very different lens and talk about, okay, all these developmental changes that are happening in an adolescent. What are some advantages that a teacher can use in that environment, because all those things are changing with them? There's no point in life when you're more seeking status and respect as when you're a teenager. And rather than looking at that as a deficit, how can we reframe our language as an adult, as a teacher, to make it more likely that we give you an opportunity to raise your status and your level of respect within a math classroom? So some of the science we always share with the teachers. This first piece, it's a busy slide, but we like to show them just all the different things that are happening within the students in their classrooms. So this is basically just showing all the different biological changes, lifestyle changes, everything that's happening kind of for most kids, between like age 7 and 20. So not only the physical changes of puberty and testosterone and estrogen and all the things that are happening there, but also different family struggles that might be happening in your teenage years, onset of a lot of risk-taking factors that students see. They first time they try drinking, or they experiment with drugs, or they stay out too late, or they do all these things are happening in this broad stretch of adolescence. And then we put all these kids together in a math classroom, right, and ask a teacher to teach them, even though they've got some students who are way over on the left in that developmental sphere, and you've got some students who are way over on the right. But the only thing that all those students really have in common is that every day that they're in your teacher's classrooms, that's the day they've had the most testosterone they've ever had in their entire lives going through their bodies. And then the next day, like tomorrow when they're back, that will be the day they have the most testosterone they've ever had in their bodies. So we get into the weeds a little bit on the science with the teachers, so they really understand that it's not something that you need to be afraid of. You know, the fact that teenagers are more willing to take risks and they're more willing to kind of push that envelope. Um, you could be afraid of it and you could fight against it and you could take a very enforcer mindset towards that and think you need to kind of push that down. We really advocate a different route and talk with them about how they can take more of a mentor mindset, you know, with that and take advantage of some of those things. We start with sharing just kind of what happens in an adolescent mind when they are feeling criticized. And oftentimes, you know, as adults, we're not trying to criticize. If any of you have teenagers, I'm on the call. I do. I have two in my house, two boys, and I catch myself, you know, all the time criticizing, even when I'm trying not to, but it's just like a default that a lot of times as adults we do. But we give the teachers in the program kind of a background of what actually happens in a mind, you know, when you're feeling criticized. And it could be over the top criticism, and it could just be saying things like, "Don't you remember we did this last week?" To start off a conversation. You get a student finally raises their hand to ask for help, and you as the teacher comes over to help them. And if really even you're not trying to be mean, but if you say something like, "Don't you remember when we did this last week?" That immediately is going to light up almost like a character flaw that I think I might have. You know, and maybe as a teacher, I didn't mean to make somebody feel bad, you know, that I'm disappointed in them as a person because they weren't paying good enough attention last week. Really, I just wanted to remind them of you know, something that we already did. So we help the teachers take a step back, see what happens when you lead with something like that, and think of some different ways to enter that conversation with a young person. So this was a study that was done. It was showing moms criticizing daughters. Could have been fathers criticizing sons. It could have been fathers. It's not a gender thing. But we ran a study. Um, you know, set up young people with all the brain scan stuff, and essentially recorded their parent criticizing them about cleaning up their room. So and showed in the what happens in the mind of what shuts off and what lights up when we're trying to do that. So this just says, you know, the parent picture of mom talking to a daughter says, "One thing that bothers me about you is that you get upset over minor issues. I could tell you to take your shoes from downstairs. You'll get mad that you have to pick them up and actually walk upstairs and put them in your room. You'll get mad if I tell you your room is a little dirty and it just needs sweeping and dusting. You get upset if your sisters want to do something that you don't agree on, but three of them do and you don't want to do it. You get upset too easily and you just need to calm that down." So something that you know, I know I've said a version of that, you know, and my goal is for them to clean their room, right? Or to pick up after themselves. But as soon as we take that critical approach, we can show in the brain scans that all the things that you really want a young person to be thinking through, like cognitively deciding, "Oh yeah, I should clean my room." All that stuff gets turned off. They're just feeling criticized. They've got strong negative emotions. So we work with the teachers to say, okay, when you um, uh, catch yourself inadvertently criticizing, it's like you're pushing a rock uphill, right? You're not going to meet your goals either. So how can we take a step back and relook at how we enter conversations with students around critical points in a math classroom? Like there's assessments when they get those grades back, missing work, anything that, you know, you have a strong curriculum, but maybe as a teacher or as an adult, you're saying things that are making it less likely that your student's going to engage with those. Some additional science, we always share with the teachers just to prove this point, you know, that there's some good things happening, you know, with this increase in testosterone and puberty changes that we can take advantage of in a math classroom. So that graph on the left is just testosterone development. So we see it's in that sixth through ninth grade math period. Obviously, it's higher in boys than girls, but for both, it's growing every day. On the right, we always share some studies as well about two different things that are also happening in a young person at that time that affect their willingness to take a risk or stay engaged in a math classroom. You've got a heightened sense of fear of evaluation. You feel like you're embarrassed easily. You feel like everybody's looking at you. If any of you remember being a teenager, we remember we've always had that spotlight syndrome, right? We always felt that everybody was looking at us. So that study in the upper right is we took some students, young people, in that age range of, looks like about 7 to 24, put them in a lab setting, turned an fMRI machine on, so it was they're whirling around them and said, you just need to sit in there. And you don't need to do anything, but just so you know, we invited 5 or 6 of your peers, and they're just going to look through this one-way glass and stare at you while you're in there. They're just going to look. And then they had to report their levels of feeling of embarrassment, of self-reported embarrassment. So obviously we see a heightened sense of that happening with young people as well. And then that last study that you pair that with also at the same time, though, that kind of disconnect is you have a heightened sense of willingness to take a risk. So that study that we did down there was a game, you blow up a balloon, and the higher you get the balloon, the more points you score. But if the balloon pops, you get no points. And obviously, if you don't blow the balloon up at all, you don't win either. And we just measured the amount of explosions, that happened. People that went all the way over the edge. They took too much of a risk, and it popped in their face. And that's the y-axis there. So it's a heightened also sense of willingness to take a risk as a teenager at that same time. So our big question in Fuse with your teachers, how can we help you kind of stop fearing adolescent development and harness it in a way that you can improve engagement around a high stakes, difficult concept like learning math as a secondary student? And it can go one way, two different ways, right? So math is oftentimes seen as a threat to a student who has not felt successful, in math in the past, and they're confronted with a challenging problem or they're asked to perform something publicly maybe, or they're asked to turn in an assessment or work with a group. That's a threat response, right? So a couple things will happen to a student. They'll either see that as a threat, and maybe they've been fed messages in elementary school or other places that I can't do this. They might view themselves as not a math person. And what happens if you have that self-identity is you shut down, right? You constrict. So that's a high demand. And if we don't match that level of resource need for the students emotionally in that setting, then all these things are going to happen. They're going to internalize that idea that I can't do this. Their blood, we actually measure their blood vascular restricts. So there's more blood like going to the center of the body because they feel under threat. So that's a old evolutionary piece, right? So if we were under threat, like a bear was chasing us, blood, which would or still does, goes to the center of our body to protect our limbs because we might get an arm bit off or something and we wouldn't want to bleed out. So if we feel under threat, we have a constriction, our cortisol goes up, we're not thinking as clearly, and the testosterone that we want to take advantage of goes down. There's more anxiety and worse performance. So if we have a student who is already struggling and we're not effective with our language in that moment, then they're going to end up they're going to stay in that threat response place. We work with teachers to reframe their language around some of those key places and change the culture in their classroom to help students think of stress as more of a challenge type response. I can do this. Let them know, okay, yeah, you're nervous. You feel a little anxious. That's good. That's normal. You should feel that way. You've worked very hard on this. And that's those feelings you have in your stomach, those tingles in your hands, that's your body getting ready to do something important. That's important to you. And you can use that to your advantage. So different ways to enter into a conversation that's going to not constrict, that's going to lower your cortisol, raise your testosterone, you feel less anxiety, and hopefully perform better. So that challenge type response is what we talk a lot with the teachers about, is noticing those moments in the math classroom where we want to enter into a conversation because we have that high rigor curriculum. We want to have that same level of support. And we might have the technical support, but if we don't talk to students and young people in a way, they're not going to take advantage of that opportunity that we have. So just another way to look at it, we've got a stressful situation, right? And students learn this in their modules. So they learn that, okay, I know there's a test coming up. That's a stressful situation. My teacher asked for a volunteer, stressful situation. In a traditional culture of compliance, some teachers would go this route, right? We want to maintain that high level of rigor, but it's an environment where, well, you need to buck up. You need to put your big boy pants on and not be stressed and get out there and do your best. Okay, that's one approach. That's the culture of compliance. It's go learn. We keep those high demands, right? We keep the highly rigorous curriculum, but we don't match it with that level of resource and support. So it's like go try harder alone. come back, retake the test, and then we'll see how you do. See how you do. Or I don't do retakes. You had one shot. You should have studied harder, or you should have paid better attention. And now here we are. So we keep that demand high, but we don't have that level of support. So it's an impossible demand for many of our students who don't engage with us the way we would like to. Or we have a lot of teachers, right? They take the other route. They lower those demands because they have more of a protector mentality. In Texas, we hear a lot about, or pobrecitos. I hear that from some teachers. That we don't want to have that rigor too high because the poor kids aren't ready for that challenge. We don't want that. All of our students deserve a highly rigorous curriculum that's going to prepare them for be successful in their grade level now and be successful in the future. But oftentimes, if we don't equip our teachers with that level of emotional support of how to frame their language and different things like that with students, then they end up lowering those demands and nobody meets the X level of expectation that we hope. So in Fuse, we talk a lot about, how do you keep that highly rigorous curriculum there? And then how do we raise that level of support and resources to create an environment where students feel they can meet that level of demand that a good teacher has set there for them. But they're not going to do it alone. We're going to be there to support them along the way. So how do Fuse teachers, promote challenge type stress responses in their class? It really highlights students owning their own thinking, revisiting mistakes, interrogating misconceptions, open-ended questioning. So we work with the teachers on how do you do something like collaborative troubleshooting. So that's one of our modules where we might have a student who's raised their hand and needs help. And rather than come over and save the day and give them the answer or show them specifically how to do it, how do you enter a conversation where you keep the thinking on the student side? You might say something like, "Oh, I love what you did right here. You did that right." You want to surface, you want to recognize something they did well. And then what's a way we can surface their thinking? So tell me more about this piece, right? And then how do we bridge to a better understanding? So how do we, without giving them the answer, ask some guiding questions, that will help them get closer to that on their own? Because we respect them too much to just show them how to do it. That's something that the teachers in Fuse I hear say a lot. That at first they would say, well, my students, they get upset when I don't just show them how to do it, that's normal because maybe those kids were used to their teacher always just showing them how to do it. So we had some teachers yesterday say, well, I tell my kids, I respect you too much to just give you the answer. And it took a year, or not a year, but it took several months of telling them that over and over again because they're still teenagers. They're not going to accept what we tell them the first time. But trying to change that mindset in the students to take advantage of that level of respect. So 100 years of adolescent development science in one slide to kind of shift our thinking away from how we might look down on adolescence or look down on puberty and not see the advantages. So teenagers' brains and hormones make them hypersensitive about status. We know that. I'm sure you see that. How they look to others, how they feel about themselves. There's never a time in life where rejection feels worse or where acceptance feels better. So you as a teenager, you take a chance and you try to hold somebody's hand and they reciprocate and they hold your hand. I don't know if anybody here remembers how that felt, but you never feel more accepted, when you're accepted as a teenager. But at the same time, if you get rejected or you're made to feel like less than, either on purpose or even inadvertently by a teacher, by something they say, there's never a time in life that it feels worse because you do have that spotlight syndrome that all teenagers have. And that sense even enhances the fear of failure in a subject like math. But we promote that's not all bad. That's an evolutionary imperative, for teenagers to be going through because it's when they're figuring out who they are in the world, how they contribute, what their role is, how they're going to make the world a better place. So we say that's not bad. It helps them transition into successfully in adulthood, and with that understanding, it's possible to harness that and use it to promote deeper engagement and learning, specifically in secondary math. But we have to do it by matching that level of respect with the level of rigor. So every teacher in every district that we work with in Fuse has a different math curriculum, a different scope and sequence, different units. I'm sure those of you guys on the call from the other international schools and all around, you have different curriculums and different plans. So that all stays the same. We work with teachers on, okay, how are you framing your language around key points in the math classroom to make it more likely that they're going to stay engaged with your rigorous curriculum? So we match that level of rigor with a level of respect and support. And we really try to help teachers from falling down that trap of thinking like I need to be on one side or the other. Right? Dr. Yeager, if you've read his book, he talks a lot about mentor mindset versus like protector mindset. And what we see anyway with a lot of teachers is we land on one side or the other. We either think that teenagers, they need that high structure, they need to learn responsibility. That like in the real world, they're not going to be able to turn in anything late, which is not true. But it's a mindset, right? That if I'm not getting them ready for the next grade level or whatever, I'm letting them down. So I have this real high rigor, or I lower my expectations and I just really worry about protecting them and caring, loving, but that become more of a wimp or a pushover. So that doesn't help anybody either. And we're not really have to be stuck in this like dichotomy of like Arnold Schwarzenegger and the Terminator or Arnold Schwarzenegger and twins. It doesn't have to be one or the other. So in Fuse, we talk a lot to the teachers about how do we hit that middle point, right? Where we're have the rigor high. I've said that many times, and we match that with the level of support. So how do we do it? I just got a few more slides about kind of the nuts and bolts of what Fuse actually looks like for your teachers, then I'll stop and answer questions. So I already talked about some of our collaborators. So Dr. Yeager, he is our main lead scientific director. I take the lead on working with districts and outreach and facilitation. He does the bulk of the work working directly with your teachers on all the science, the background. They pretty much get his class at UT that he teaches to undergrads at UT about the psychology of adolescent development. But through a lens of in a math classroom, secondary math classroom in 2025, how can we use that knowledge to have a better understanding of our communication around assessments, around mistakes, around high stakes points in a math classroom to make that hit home. Carol Dweck is a key part of our team as well. You may be familiar with her. She wrote Mindset about a while ago, several years ago. But she and Dr. Yeager are really the crux behind the development of Fuse. And a big piece, if I don't know if I was in the PD world with Round Rock ISD, that's a large school district just north of Austin. So I was the chief of teaching and learning before joining UT about a year and a half ago. And I was in a professional development role when Mindset came out. I don't know if many of the others were as well, but everybody wanted growth mindset training, right? What was missed, I think, in that first iteration was that it was all about how to get the kids to have a growth mindset. And nobody really talked about the environment of the classroom, the teacher, the space that was created. It was more, at least with my experience, it was more, okay, we need to teach kids how to have this. And that was not the intention at all of Dr. Dweck or Dr. Yeager or the people that did that research in the beginning. And rather than continue to have other people create training for them, they brought in people like myself and others on our team to work directly with them to create this fellowship for teachers to make sure that it's exactly how they were seeing it. So that's why your teachers get access to her. She's on our panels oftentimes to meet with the teachers. That's great as well. Mary Murphy is a key part of our team. If you're familiar with math in the state of Texas or worldwide, really, Dr. Uri Treisman is a legendary calculus teacher here at UT Austin, and he is most well known for if you've ever read The Inequality Machine by Paul Tough, it really goes into depth on how he is able to take students from across the state of Texas. So in Texas, if you're not familiar, if you're in the top 5 or 6% in your graduating class, you get automatic enrollment into UT Austin. What that means is Texas is very diverse when it comes to high school experience. So you might have a lot of students in that class who were top 2-3% in their high school graduating class in a very rural district, somewhere far from one of our city centers, or could even be in the city center. But you might have a high school student who never had calculus in high school, but still graduated in that top 5 or 6%. And then you've got other students who had maybe 2 years, had pre-cal, had calculus. They might have had all these different supports in high school, and they all come together at UT and learn together in his calculus class. And he has some of the highest expectations you can ever imagine, to prepare his students, for to be mathematicians throughout their time at UT. But he has that same level of emotional and support built right into it. So he can take students from vastly different backgrounds and they can all be successful in a math classroom. Very similar. I correlate that to students right now who are going from like 5th to 6th grade, and we're trying to accelerate more and more students into accelerated 6th grade math so they can take Algebra 1 as 8th graders. And they performed well on their STAR test. Assessment-wise, they've done great, but they haven't seen themselves in elementary school as a strong math student. They were never like pulled out to go to GT or tag. They always performed great, but they now all of a sudden they're in the same math classroom as a 6th grader who all through elementary was, fed this message that they're a great math student. And so we need to help our teachers be able to meet the needs of both the emotional needs, really, of both those students who already see themselves as strong in math and those students who we know are capable, but don't have that sense of self. So Fuse is a great way for them to be able to meet both those needs. Katie Arrington is another person here at UT that works closely with us, and Dr. Art Markman, if you're familiar with Two Guys on Their Head, it's his podcast. He was on our panel last year as well. So a lot of the benefit of Fuse is you get a lot of access to great minds here at UT and beyond. But the people that work, so those guys, they talk with the math teachers, but they don't talk to them about teaching math because we keep it very separate. Like I feel like math teachers need to hear from other math teachers about how all this research and these ideas from Fuse really look in a math classroom. So these folks on our team, Christian, Sergio, Sarah, Amalia, Zaina, and Charles, so they're all current math teachers around Texas that have been through our program. They're our coaches and facilitators. So they're the ones that, when I talk about the coaching sessions here in a bit and our other sessions that your teachers would attend, they're the ones that lead a lot of the like in the moment training with the teachers. Just a few more before I'll stop for some questions. So just kind of our big beliefs. So over the 2 years, to complete all of Fuse, it's 2 years for teachers. So 1 year, they really focus on their culture of learning, making sure that their messages around their beliefs, their policies are all aligned to what they are saying, essentially. So you don't want to be, as a teacher, saying that, tests are not a one-time thing. They don't define who you are. One test result doesn't define who you are. I believe in you continuing to be able to learn. And then at the same time over here, be saying that, well, you've got to have this retest turned in, in 2 days and, or you can't come in for a retest or anything like that. So we really work with them to make sure that their messages are aligned. And the way they're communicating that is upfront with their students and almost overly transparent. We talk to them a lot about with teenagers, and adolescents. We need to say things multiple times. If we say we want to value mistakes and raising your hand is a contribution to the class, it's not a disruption to as the teacher, my lesson. That's an interesting aside. We ask the students, is your perception of your math class, does it feel rushed? When you raise your hand and ask for help, do you feel like you're letting your teacher down? And there's such a correlation that we can show the teachers that the students who don't feel like they're just personally letting their teacher down by raising their hand or disrupting her lesson are the same students who are reporting that they feel much more confident in math, they feel less math anxiety, and they perform better. So then we work with the teachers to make sure that you're saying things that don't give a sense that your class is rushed. So be careful of saying things like we have so much to cover, or even body language. When you're in the middle of teaching and somebody raises their hand to ask for help, we have video tools too where they can record themselves and they can see, okay, somebody raises their hand, asks for help. Is my body language, giving a perception that I see that as almost a character flaw? Am I taking that personally? So that's a key piece that we can help them with the data then to show that there's a connection between students feeling like they're not rushed and feeling at ease and less anxious in the math classroom. And then, so many of our other, on that side, the engaged brain, so we also talk with the teachers around a lot of practices that create a sense of calm almost in math and make it more likely that they're able to retrieve information and they don't make the same mistakes. We talked to them a lot about this. Like one of the most frustrating things is you might have a student making a mistake in September. They get all these interventions in between, right? And then they do all these worksheets, packets, whatever it is, small group, and then you get to March and they're making that same mistake. So we've got some tools and different ways for them to work with them as well to try to cut down on that forgetting curve. Some of the practices after our webinar today, I'm going to send you a direct link to a page on our website that has a quick synopsis of each of there's only 8 on the slide here, but there's 10 total practices that they learn over the 2 years. You can click on any of those on our site and get just a couple paragraphs about what each one is. Just to go over a couple of them just verbally real quick. So exam speeches, that's one that we worked with teachers actually yesterday in their spring PLI. So we help them craft their message around, okay, what are you going to say when you first announce that, okay, the big test is coming up next week? So it might be a few days before that's going to happen, but how are you going to frame your language to make sure that you're, one, not using repressive language about anxiety or about stress, but also making sure that you are reminding them that it's a way for them to, it doesn't define who they are kind of as a person, how they do. And then what are you going to say the day of the test? Just a paragraph, it's not long, but how are you going to frame your language that day to make it more likely that they'll stay engaged and understand that nervousness they might be feeling, like I said before, doesn't mean there's something wrong with them, or doesn't mean that they shouldn't be in that class. It just means that this is important to them and that they're going to use that extra oxygen that's going through their body to do even better. And then finally, what are you going to say when you pass the test back and they get those grades? Like, how can we be super specific and intentional about how we're going to frame our language to make it more likely that they will come in for tutoring afterwards if they didn't perform up to what they hope they did. And we want them to come in and do that retest. So how are we going to make sure that we're framing that, in a way that doesn't seem embarrassing, doesn't seem like there's some kind of character flaw, in them, as in they didn't study enough, or maybe they didn't, who knows, maybe they didn't study enough. At that point, we don't care, because we want them to come in for the retest. We want them to come in for tutoring. We want that. We're not here to teach them responsibility, right? We're here to teach them math, and we want them to come in for that piece. So that's exam speeches. Engaged prediction is one we talk about, how you can, filter in a lot more predictive language, in your general instruction. Science and memory, we go into details on that, reframing mistakes. You can go to our website that I'll send you, and you can get background on all those. I'm going to skip us forward here. So just one example, reframing mistakes is one of the practices they learn. And again, it's how to reframe in the classroom to not seem that raising your hand is so risky that I might be embarrassed, even unintentionally on the teacher's part. So just as an example, the teachers identify some of their own language that they want to fix, but we have examples for them. So one is, what happens when, as a math teacher, you say, okay, this is an easy one, or you ask for volunteers, or somebody raises their hand and they didn't know how to do it, and it just slips off the tongue, right? You don't mean anything bad by it, but you might have said that as a teacher. So what the teacher means and why this is said, teacher wants to encourage students to show them what they already know, right? There's no ill intent there, but that's so often misinterpreted by students, because what if they didn't know that one? Now I don't even know the easy one. That's what's going on in their mind. So they may feel dumb, anxious about not knowing how to work it. So then we work with teachers on, how can we rephrase that? So it takes some practice, but we can change the way we talk if we practice it. And that's what we work with the teachers on. So how might we rephrase something like that? Look back at your notes from yesterday, help you get started on that problem. You will notice there are problems very similar that can be used as a guide in finding, if you find yourself stuck, get as far as, and then we will discuss how everyone worked it. So it's a little wordier, but it's more transparent. And it doesn't leave up for interpretation in the mind of a 15-year-old to take us for, because a lot of times a 15-year-old is going to assume a negative, right? If we're not transparent about why we're saying what we're saying, oftentimes they will assume the worst, in adults, because they've had some, hopefully not in any of your teachers' classrooms, but sometimes they've had, negative experiences with adults and things they've said. So if we help the teachers learn that how transparent you really need to be to overcome some of that scar tissue that might have been built up with them along the way. So here's a great picture of our team from last summer's kickoff event. So what does it actually look like for your teachers? So if you have teachers that are going to sign up, so we start in the summer with our kickoff events. So it's a one-day, either in-person or virtual kickoff, where they meet me, the facilitators, Dr. Yeager. We do a few of these around the state of Texas and online. So I know a lot of you are not here in Texas, so your teachers would either log in to a kickoff event through our platform. We use Canvas and Engagely. Or they could do the summer completely asynchronous, because I know in the summertime, a lot of teachers are teaching summer school, their schedules are different, everything like that. So we build the summer to be very personalized. So it's a 1 day kind of kickoff around the science, and then they complete 3 different modules within Canvas throughout the summer as well. It takes about 15 to 20 total hours. Then before the school year starts, I meet with all of them once again, just as a quick refresher. We talk to them about their first student engagement modules. I'll talk more about those in a second. Then they get their school year started. In the fall, they do a 1 day institute. So that's all virtual as well. So it's a full day where they get more of the science talks. They do 2 additional practices. And then in the spring, they do their spring institute as well, where we really talk to them about, okay, how can you use everything you've learned this year to set yourself up for success leading into the end of the school year. And a lot of places, that's where a lot of that high stakes testing happens. But just to how to end the school year well using what you've learned in Fuse. So if you're here in Texas, we're going to do a few of those in person, but the in person is not required at all. That's just an option. If you happen to live close to one of the places we're doing an in-person session, you could go to one of those in the summer. They also attend 4 coaching meetings throughout the year with our facilitators that I showed you before. So those are all outside the workday. We give them choices either to show up at 7 a.m. or 5:30 p.m. And now we got a lot of international folks on the call today, so we would figure something out. We don't have any international yet, so we haven't had to figure that out, but that's definitely a fixable problem that we could figure out how to make sure that we get some interaction in those coaching sessions, no matter where you are around the world. Like I said, happen outside the school day. And it's a great way for them to check in with the facilitators, talk about what's working, get ideas from one another. The network, of Fuse math teachers from around the world, hopefully, is really one of the strengths of Fuse as well. They learn a ton from expanding their network of secondary math teachers. I mentioned briefly that students in each of the teachers' classrooms do 3 modules throughout the year. They learn a lot of the same science that your teachers would be learning. So they learn how their brain brings back memories, how the importance of doing things like spiraling and space practice and interleaving. They learn about stress and how they can reframe stress. One of the best modules that they do in January. That's where they learn, like I've said many times, about kind of that stress could be enhancing, stress is enhancing effect. That our team has done a lot of research around helping young people understand that, like I said, those butterflies or that feeling of heightenedness, is not a bad thing. And you can flip the switch on that and choose how you respond to it. And especially as a young person, you just test that out 1 or 2 times and you can learn that, oh yeah, I felt nervous, but I felt nervous before every great thing I did, right? And as adults, we think, before an interview for a job we really wanted, sure, we felt nervous. Before we asked somebody on a date, you felt nervous. All these different times you feel nervous. But oftentimes in the math classroom, because of sometimes the teacher's language, it's seen as a bad thing. So we work with them on things like, okay, maybe don't say, don't worry about it, or just take a deep breath, or don't stress. We don't want to say things that discount their feelings, right? So when you discount a teenager's feelings, it's like they just reinforces the idea that there's something wrong with them. But if we flip that and say, it's great that you feel that way. It's because this is important to you. I'm glad it's important to you. I'm proud of you for taking this so seriously. And those feelings that you have going on right now, that means your body's going to be tuned to do something challenging and important. So just that little flip, can totally change how somebody looks at their idea of stress. Okay, so last couple things. So teachers do earn $1,000. There is a tuition involved that districts would pay. I'll get to that in a moment, but I wanted to start with this piece where teachers earn $1,000 each year out of the tuition that districts would pay. We don't ask a lot of them in terms of like turning in assignments or anything like that, but we do ask for a lot of their feedback on, okay, how did you change your language about mistakes change the engagement in your class? What changes are you noticing with your students? So we ask them a lot of questions along the way, and we ask them to contribute a lot to the learning of their peers. So we might ask them to bring one of their latest assessments and talk through how they prepared students for that using some of the Fuse practices, and then share all that with other math teachers in the program. So we do ask for them to share and contribute. So we want to honor that. So they get $500 at the end of the first semester, $500 at the end of the second. The cost is, I'm happy to announce that we're able to maintain a lower cost for at least 2 more years. Originally, when we started Fuse, it was $3,500 per teacher because it's not just like we're interacting with them all year long, so it's a full partnership. It's not just a PD event they go to and then come back and never hear from us again. So they're constantly getting reports. They're constantly getting different things from us. So it's started off at 3,500. Right now, we've been able to maintain that lower price of $2,350. So if teachers sign up this year, we lock in that price for each of the 2 years, and each year they get $1,000 back out of that $2,350. Here's just some of the districts in Texas that we're working with currently. Like I said, we're just starting now to expand beyond Texas. We'll be working with Arizona, a district in Arizona next year, probably some up in the New York area, still in discussion with them, and then would be super excited to start expanding, beyond even the United States. And I know a lot of American schools are on the call today, and would love to. I think it's really the way that we've built something that I think would allow your teachers in all around the globe, in different time zones to have a mix of some live interaction, with colleagues from around the world, but then also like our program is very much built to be interactive, but be interactive at your own time and pace. So a lot of asynchronous back and forth within Canvas, I think could really help kind of meet those needs of people from all over the place. But if you're in Texas and any of these districts look familiar, there's some of the ones we're working with currently. And be happy to connect you with anybody there. So I'm going to end with just a quote from Dr. Treisman. At last, a truly rigorous approach to the human elements of teaching math. So that's our big thing is that, I know there's tons of programs and apps and some of those are great. Like we work closely with Shalini Sharma. She's the CEO of Zern. She wrote MathMind. If you've seen any of her TED Talks or anything like that, like her message and her product actually, aligns very well with kind of our beliefs, within Fuse. But what your teachers experience here is very much about them and it's investing in them and investing in their ability to connect better with their students, whether they stay in that math classroom or go anywhere else, honestly. So it's really an investment in them as people and being able to better connect with their students. And our real belief is that that'll help with two things, right? Going all the way back to the beginning. It's going to help with math performance because students will be more likely to ask for help and stay engaged and do all the things we want them to do. And it's going to honestly just make, as a professional, as a teacher, there's nothing more important to you than, even if it's a wrong response, it's just to have somebody engaged in that process with you. And I think our data and our program has shown to make it more likely that the young people will stay engaged with the teacher, which leads to less burnout and, let more engagement on the adult side, I think is what I'm saying as well. So I talked a lot. I'm going to pause, encourage you to sign up for our newsletter there, but would love to just answer any questions. You'll get all this stuff in an email afterwards, as well as ways to set up. So my real ask is if this resonated with you at all, I'd love to meet with you or anybody on your teams individually. We'll set up a time to talk about your particular circumstance and your district and figure out where we go from there. But any just general questions, what sticks out to you, anything like that about the programs, you can unmute. There's not too many of us on the call, so just go for it.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Thanks, Ryan. Nate Chapman. I'm on the call with Leslie. We're in Portugal right now at the American School there. And yeah, thank you. We're all in on this. It sounds great. We're just wondering a couple of things. Do you have any plans to roll out, for other subject areas? It seems, math focused, but it's the kind of thing that seems like it would be applicable to other subject areas. And then the second question is just, from a practical standpoint, we have some teachers who probably would benefit from this, who are really like, outside of that middle school, high school grade range. And I'm curious what if you have anything to share on, maybe sort of that third, fourth, fifth grade kind of dynamic, pre-adolescence.
Yeah, no, definitely. So your first part of your question with the other subject areas. So probably the next one that we're we're looking into is CTE. So you're right that any of these, I mean, like the practices are universal. You know, it's about how to talk to young people. But like our belief really is for it to be super engaging to the teachers who are in the program. It needs to be very relevant to their particular content. So that's why we didn't build like a general all size or one size fits all program. So like our modules and everything use math examples. The quotes and everything are from math teachers. So that's kind of where we started with that. But our next plans are to move into CTE, which would be a little bit more of a general. It's career and technical education, so still a secondary focus. But we're also small enough still that we can pivot, you know, pretty easily. You know, if we think there's some demand for a different grade level or different things like that. One piece that I think with the younger grades is if we did think there was a lot of interest in that, that's something we could definitely meet more about. I'd love to meet afterwards. It would just be a matter of us taking some of the student modules and probably rewriting them in a more elementary friendly way. Because right now we try to hit that sweet spot of like 6th to 12th grade readability. And I know some of the math items that we have on there would not really work with younger people, but it doesn't mean that that's not a doable thing on our part. So I think if there's enough demand, I guess is what I'm saying, it's something that we could definitely look at. Let's see, I got some other questions in the chat. Oh, Brooke, welcome. Glad another Round Rock person. A great district. I spent 20 years there as a special ed teacher, principal, assistant principal, central office person. Yeah, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. We can set something up. Oh, go ahead, Brooke.
No, go ahead. No, I was just figuring out where to unmute. Yeah, just that's super cool to hear. I love connections.
Yes. Good. Yeah. So anybody else? Any other anything stick out to anybody that really resonates with you or anything like that? All right. Well, then what I'm going to do is you'll get everybody on the call, or even if you're watching the recordings, I know time zones, you know, must be all over the place for us today. You'll get an email with this recording, and then within that, I'm also going to add a link to my scheduling link, so you can use that that'll ties right into my calendar. So you can just pick a time that works on there for you, and then that, like I said, that's my ask. You know, is that if this resonated with you at all, or you think your teachers would benefit, then just set up a time. Either respond to that email, set up a time, and we can talk through your particular situation. We've got a little bit of time, so teachers wouldn't launch. Teachers in Texas are going to launch in late June, early July. Right now, my plan is for any non-Texas or international teachers to because usually your calendar's a little different. In Texas, school starts early in August. So my plan right now is for international non-Texas teachers to launch probably in mid to late July, and then that'll give them time to do all the modules, get going. So what I'm saying is we've got a little bit of time before we would need to know like who your teachers are and stuff like that. We can spend some time thinking through agreements, what kinds of teachers, things like along those lines. All right. Well, that's all Catherine and I have for you today. Really enjoyed your time. If you haven't picked up a copy of Dr. Yeager's book, we'll send you a link to that as well. If you have read his book, essentially it's a lot of his book and Dr. Dweck's book crafted into a 2-year fellowship for math teachers. So if that resonates with you, then your teachers would enjoy this as well. So yes, we'll send you the slides. I'll send you all that stuff so you can have that. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. And we'll call it a day. See, I can never find where to stop recording. I don't want to hit leave, right? You're muted.